Chapter 61. Gu Shengyin opened her eyes again and found herself back in the pure white space. She stretched out her hand. It was white, soft, and full of vitality. It was not the pale and wrinkled hand she had in the previous world. Cheng Shiji had no regrets in her life. Even at the end of her life, she left in the arms of the person she loved the most. Thinking of Yuan Su, Gu Shengyin's mouth unconsciously raised into a smile. System, can you tell me now who Yuan Su is? Gu Shengyin asked. She was not stupid. Someone who could be reincarnated in a different world with her could not be an ordinary person. However, the omniscient system was stuck this time. Unable to find any information about the target Yuan Su, unable to find any information about the target Gu, Gu Shengyin was really surprised this time. She knew very well that the system would not lie. If it did not want to tell her, it would at most say, "Sorry, the host does not have enough authority to tell you." If the system said that it could not find anything, it meant that it really did not know what kind of existence her lover was. Gu Shengyin was also quite curious. What kind of identity could a person who could not be detected by the system? The system said, "Host, do you want to rest for a while or go to the next mission world?" Gu Shengyin chose to go on with the mission without hesitation. She could not wait to see her lover. The mission world this time was a Western fantasy world. There were ordinary people, swordsmen, magicians, and magical beasts led by giant dragons. The female protagonist of this world was the first Duke of the Carter Empire in this world. As the heir of the White Rose Duke Mansion, Veronica Roman was a natural swordswoman. When she was born and baptized, she was tested by the Archbishop at that time to have a godlike aptitude, and was personally accepted as a goddaughter. Veronica's life was also quite glorious. She carried the glory of the White Rose family all her life. After inheriting the title of Duke, she fought for the Carter Empire all her life. Under her efforts, the reputation of the White Rose family was almost on par with the royal family. She was also praised by historians as one of the greatest women of the Carter dynasty. Such a legendary figure who had left his name in the annals of history had been obliterated by a useless cannon fodder from a small family in a remote city. Eve Heather was just a fisherman's daughter. When she was born, her mother died in childbirth because of her. Because of this, her father especially hated this ominous daughter and beat and scolded her since she was young. Finally, when Eve was 8 years old, she pushed her drunk father into the river. Then, he packed up his belongings and left the small mountain village. In the process of escaping, Eve picked up the treasure that changed her life, the necklace that sealed the Demon King. After being sealed in the necklace for countless years, the Demon King had finally escaped. At that time, he was already extremely weak and had no choice but to sign a contract with Eve. The Demon King, who had lived for tens of thousands of years, had a rich store of knowledge and knew how to improve Eve's trash aptitude to an excellent level. As compensation, Eve had to provide the Demon King with the best medicine for his recovery, the souls of living people. The higher the aptitude of the mage or swordsman, the more benefits the Demon King could obtain from absorbing their soul. The female lead, Veronica, was one of the Demon King's biggest targets. She was said to have the potential to be a god. Chapter 62. Gu Shengyin was lying on a bench in the White Rose Garden, receiving the memories transmitted by the system. So, my first task is to stay alive? The previous worlds were relatively gentle, but she did not expect this world to be so cruel. The system's calm voice sounded, "Yes, the host. The system has detected that your body is 13 years old, and the cannon fodder Eve is 10 years old. At this time, she has already obtained the necklace that sealed the Demon King, and is on her way to the King's city." Gu Shengyin was silent for a moment, then asked, "System, if I were to fight the Demon King now, what are the chances of me defeating him?" The system answered honestly, "None." Gu Shengyin. She was secretly thinking, should she tell her godfather, the Archbishop, that Eve was carrying the necklace that sealed the Demon King? The system poured cold water on her without mercy. "I don't recommend the host to do this. The original body has never left the King's city, so you can't explain how you know this. If the host really does this, it is very likely that you and Eve will be eliminated as heretics. Gu Shengyin could only give up this tempting idea. Your Highness, the second prince is here to see you. A maid came forward, waking Gu Shengyin from her meditation. Gu Shengyin elegantly got up, nodded to the maid, and walked towards the reception hall. Hironica! From afar, a young man's voice called out to her. Hironica walked over unhurriedly, and gave the person a standard aristocratic salute. Your Highness the second prince. The young man's beautiful eyebrows suddenly wrinkled. I've told you many times, Hironica, there is no need to be so polite in front of me. Gu Shingyin's expression did not change. Your Highness, etiquette cannot be ignored. Liveman was helpless. All right, Hironica, your father the Duke has taught you too old-fashioned. Gu Shingyin's expression became serious. Your Highness, please do not criticize my elders. Liveman looked at the girl in front of him. The 13-year-old girl was already very tall, and her figure was beginning to show the embryonic form of a woman. The heir of the White Rose family had golden curly hair that was as bright as the sun. Her pure eyes were like the purest green gems. Her milk-white skin was inherited from her mother, the Duchess of White Rose. She also had delicate lips that were like flower petals. It was a pleasure to be able to hear his name from her mouth. The Pearl of the Empire. Liveman did not know how many times he had heard the nobles secretly talk about the heir of the Duke. She was as dazzling and charming as her family emblem, the White Rose. Unfortunately, Liveman looked at Veronica's serious and expressionless face and sighed secretly. The Duke of White Rose was known for his strictness in the Empire. He had taught his only daughter to be this way, old-fashioned, well-mannered, and her every move was as standard as what was written in the textbooks. Your Highness the Prince, what do you want? His Highness the Prince? Liveman came back to his senses, and remembered the purpose of his visit. My mother's purebred Siamese cat gave birth to 3 children, and I brought you one. Do you like it? Liveman held up a delicate small basket as if he was presenting a treasure. Lifting the cloth on the small basket, Gu Shengyin saw the creature inside. Chapter 63. A little guy, not even the size of a palm, was lying on the soft cushion in the basket. His newborn eyes had not yet opened, and only his nose moved from time to time. Perhaps he was not used to the sudden light, and his body was slightly curled up. Of course she liked it. Gu Shengyin loved this kind of furry thing in her past life. She almost couldn't help but reach out to touch it. But she remembered Veronica's character and suppressed the urge. She just couldn't help but look at the kitten in the basket. Little did she know that in the eyes of the second prince, she was much cuter than the kitten in the basket. The beautiful little girl clearly liked the kitten so much that her eyes were almost glued to it, but she kept a straight face and pretended to be serious and unconcerned. In the end, she was still a child. The second prince only felt his index finger itch. He really wanted to pinch her face. The second prince put his finger back into his sleeve and handed the basket to Gu Shengyin. Here, take good care of her. This prince will check on her often. In a wild forest thousands of miles away from the king's city, a thin figure was trekking with difficulty. Your Excellency, why are we in such a hurry to go to the king's city? The figure asked in a clear voice. This person was Eve Heather. There was no sound coming from the ring, but Eve Heather didn't find it strange. She held the necklace in front of her chest with her empty left hand. The strange soul lived in the necklace around her neck. 2 months ago, when she picked up this necklace, it was just a simple girl who liked beautiful things and kept it. Until she saw the shadow in the necklace, or rather, the soul. The soul's offer was very tempting. As long as she helped him find enough souls, he would tell her how to improve her aptitude. Eve Heather agreed on the spot, even though what the soul wanted her to do was against God's will. But what did it matter? When she was abused and beaten by her father, she had prayed countless times to God to save her, but he didn't. Until she couldn't take it anymore and pushed the man into the river. She was really scared at that time. She was afraid that God would punish her for the crime of killing her own family. But nothing happened. From then on, she knew that the so-called God did not exist at all. In other words, the high and mighty gods did not care about the life and death of mortals like them. Therefore, when she knew that she had a chance to become stronger, she agreed to the soul's request without hesitation. However, there seems to be something wrong with that person recently. Eve Heather thought to herself. In the past, whenever His Excellency appeared, she would always have the illusion of being stared at by a venomous snake. But since last month, this feeling had disappeared. His Excellency's words were noticeably less, and he no longer asked her to find the souls of living people for him. His only request was to get to the royal city as soon as possible. Eve Heather always felt that His Excellency had become much easier to get along with. If it was in the past, she would never have dared to ask any questions. Don't think too much and don't ask too many questions. Whatever you want, I will naturally give it to you when the time comes. A cold voice appeared in her mind. It was that person. Eve Heather was startled. She lowered her head and replied respectfully. Chapter 64. When he woke up from the chaos, he found that he had become a creature that was neither human nor ghost. There were many inexplicable memories in his mind. For example, he used to be the king of the demons, who ruled the whole continent. Later, he was sealed in this necklace by a cunning human. He wandered for thousands of years before he fell into the hands of a human. He was very sure that he was not the so-called king of the demons, because the previous memories of this soul instructed the girl he lived in to find the soul of a human. It was impossible for him to do such a thing. So, who was he? Where was the original body of this soul? He had been thinking about this question for a month, but he still could not figure it out. Until today, he finally figured it out. No matter who he was before, and no matter where the real body of the Demon King went, from the moment he woke up, he became the Demon King. His gaze pierced through the void and looked in the direction of King's City. There was an inexplicable desire in his heart, as if there was something very important in the distant King's City that was calling out to him. The outline of the sun had not yet appeared on the horizon, but the Duke's mansion of White Rose was already busy. Veronica got up early, put on the warrior's uniform, and began her daily morning exercise. Even though she was gifted by the heavens, her current strength could not be separated from hard work. Gu Xingyi's body was full of the power of fighting. She enjoyed this feeling very much. In the previous two worlds, whether it was Jiang Lingzhen or Cheng Shiji, they were weak women who did not have the strength to truss a chicken. Gu Xingyi, on the other hand, was a person who worshipped strength and the strong. Not to mention, according to the development of the plot, in 2 years, Eve Heather would bring the Demon King to King's City. Before that, she had to improve her strength as much as possible. Thus, the servants of the Duke's mansion found that their Highness seemed to be more diligent than before. Richard, the Duke of White Rose, stood in front of the window in his room, looking at the small figure in the training field who was seriously practicing the swordsmanship he taught her a few days ago. There was no doubt that His Excellency the Duke was a rare handsome man. It was said that even Her Highness the Princess took a fancy to the Duke's handsome appearance and expressed her willingness to marry him. However, the Duke chose his current wife, Veronica's mother. Looking at his daughter, Richard could not help but feel proud. Although his wife and he only had one heir, Veronica did not let him down. She was smart, strong, and more outstanding than any of the heirs of the family. The Duke had no doubt that under Veronica's leadership, the glory of the White Rose family would illuminate the entire continent. Gu Xingyi's life was very regular. Every morning, she would do her routine morning exercise, then have dinner with her parents in the dining hall. After that, she would take the family carriage to the Carter Royal Academy to study. She would have lunch at the school and would not return to the Duke's mansion until 3 in the afternoon. Although the Duke of White Rose was strict, he was a good father who knew how to raise his daughter. Gu Xingyi was free to spend her time after returning home from the academy. Whether she was going out to play with noble ladies or to listen to an opera, even if she was going to the slums in the west of the city, other than sending people to protect her daughter's safety, the Duke of White Rose would not interfere too much. Sometimes, when his wife disagreed, he would persuade her instead. A qualified leader must have his own ideas. Veronica is already 13 years old. When I was her age, I followed my grandfather to the battlefield once. My dear, you must believe in our daughter. Chapter 65. Gu Shengyin carried Vera out of the door. Vera was the Siamese cat that the second prince had given to Veronica. A month had passed, and Vera's small body was covered with fine, soft white fur. She was very beautiful. She was still the size of an adult's palm, and her green eyes were the same as Veronica's. They were as beautiful as the brightest gems. Siamese cats were very delicate animals. This time, Gu Shengyin carried her out to the pet shop to buy a type of ingredient, svelte grass, which was the favorite food of Siamese cats. Nika, a girl with a few small freckles on her nose, ran to Gu Shengyin. She was Veronica's good friend, Lilith Bill, the daughter of the Earl. Lilith had heard that Veronica had gotten a rare Siamese cat. After a long time of coaxing and pestering, she finally convinced Veronica to take her out. "Is this a Siamese cat? She is so cute." Lilith looked at Vera with shining eyes. "Yes, her name is Vera. She is a lovely lady," Gu Shengyin replied. Lilith reached out to touch Vera, but Vera turned her head away in disgust. Gu Shengyin snickered. Siamese cats were extremely delicate and fussy creatures. They usually only got close to the people they liked. Gu Shengyin himself had spent a lot of effort to get Vera's favor, so of course, Lilith would run into a wall. Lilith could see that Vera didn't like her. She said sadly, "It seems that Vera doesn't like me." Gu Shengyin was about to comfort her, but she heard her continue, "Really, her personality is so similar to Nika's." Gu Shengyin was speechless. She took back her words of comfort. Lilith was still talking. "You both have green eyes and are so cute. Ha ha ha." Gu Shengyin turned and left. The two of them arrived at the entrance of the pet shop. When the boss saw Gu Shengyin's green eyes, he hurriedly greeted her, "Your Highness, may I know what you need?" Pure dark green eyes were the symbol of the White Rose family. This was something that everyone in the royal city knew. In this generation of the Duke of White Rose, Veronica was the only heir. Anyone with a discerning eye could guess her identity. Gu Shengyin revealed Vera, who was lying in his arms. "The grass she eats must be the freshest and most tender part." When the owner saw Vera, he smiled. "Oh, it's a Siamese cat. This is a precious little thing. I just happen to have some slender grass that was just delivered today. Your Highness, please wait for a moment. I'll go get it for you." Gu Shengyin and Lilith were sitting in the shop. Lilith was still trying to win Vera's favor, but she was always rejected. Gu Shengyin's expression didn't change, but there was a smile in her eyes as she looked at the woman and the cat. "Boss, wrap up all the slender grass in your shop for me." A loud voice sounded. Gu Shengyin looked up. It was a beautiful lady in red. Her eyebrows were full of arrogance. In her hand was a magic staff that was almost as tall as her. She was obviously a magician. When the lady in red saw Gu Shengyin and Lilith, her expression changed. "Why are you here?" Before Gu Shengyin could say anything, Lilith opened her mouth. "This pet shop doesn't belong to the Raymond family. If you can come, why can't we?" Chapter 66. Gu Shengyin went through the memories in his mind, and finally remembered who the magician in red was. Joanna Raymond, the granddaughter of the finance minister. Everyone in the Carter Empire knew that the Duke of White Rose and the finance minister were not on good terms. They always had different opinions when discussing national affairs, and neither could do anything to the other. Because of this, the younger generation of the two families did not like each other. There was another reason why Joanna did not like Veronica. People always compared the two of them. If it was just a simple comparison, the problem was that although she didn't want to admit it, Veronica Roman was indeed more outstanding than her, Joanna Raymond. They were of the same age, and Joanna was already a beginner magician. According to the level of magic, they started from the lowest apprentice, then went on to the sorcerer, 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 grand sorcerer, and grand sorcerer. Joanna was undoubtedly a genius to be able to cultivate to the level of a magician at the age of 13. However, Veronica was also 13 years old, but she was already a great swordsman. Similarly, warriors were divided into swordsmen, swordsman, swordsman, great swordsman, legendary swordsman, and warrior saint. In terms of level, a great swordsman was equivalent to a grand sorcerer, which was 2 levels higher than Joanna. Over time, Joanna would subconsciously avoid Veronica. It was common knowledge that Joanna of the Raymond family was nowhere to be seen in the presence of Princess Veronica of the Roman family. As Veronica's good friend, Lilith naturally had to speak up for her friend at this time. At this time, the boss came out with a bag of fresh slimline grass. "I'm really sorry, miss. The slimline grass has been reserved by Her Highness in advance," the boss said to Joanna, very embarrassed. Joanna looked at Gu Shengyin. "How much did you pay?" "I'll pay double. Give me the slimline grass." Gu Shengyin's answer was to pay the boss the crystal coins and put the slimline grass in the space ring. "You!" Joanna was exasperated. What she hated the most was the arrogant face of the Roman family. It was as if she was just a clown in their eyes. Gu Shengyin thought to herself, "I'm not going to take the blame for this. With my facial paralysis persona, I can't give you a smile." "Stop right there, Veronica Roman." Joanna's fireball flew past Gu Shengyin's clothes. If Gu Shengyin hadn't dodged it, her robe would have been ruined. Gu Shengyin turned around with a hint of anger in her eyes. Chow Anna was a little guilty. She just wanted to warn Veronica, but she didn't expect that she was too emotional and lost her aim. However, she could not show her fear in front of the Roman family. She raised her chin and said, "I told you to stop. I want the slender grass in your hands." If not for the fact that the slender grass was so hard to find, she would not have bothered Veronica Roman. At this time, Vera, who was in Gu Shengyin's arms, poked her head out and called out softly. Joanna's expression changed. "Is that a Siamese cat in your arms?" Gu Shengyin did not say anything. Joanna's face was pale. "I've asked him for it so many times, but he refused to give it to me. It turns out that he gave it to you." Gu Shengyin immediately understood why Joanna wanted the slimline grass. She suddenly felt that Joanna was a little pitiful. It was just a story of how the falling flower fell in love with the heartless brook. But sympathy was one thing. She would never give up Vera's rations. Chapter 67. Joanna seemed to have lost her soul. She glanced at Gu Shengyin, stomped her feet, and left. Gu Shengyin asked the shopkeeper to send the things to the Duke's mansion, and walked on the street with Lilith. Lilith came over and gossiped, "Joanna likes the second prince. She knows that the second prince asked the queen for a Siamese cat. She must want to get some slender grass to please the prince." She was gloating. "She must not have thought that the prince had already given it to you." At this point, Lilith mysteriously said to Gu Shengyin, "Nika, do you think His Highness likes you?" She looked at Gu Shengyin seriously, touched her chin, and said, "Nika, you are so beautiful. If I were a gentleman, I would marry you." Gu Shengyin replied to her with an expressionless face. Okay, I'm kidding." Lilith saw that Gu Shengyin ignored her, and trotted over from behind. "Let me tell you something," she said mysteriously. "Have you been to the underground Colosseum in the south of the city?" Underground Colosseum? Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up. Lilith saw that she was interested, and said proudly, "Brother Kyle got a few invitations. You know, it's hard to get tickets without connections. How about the 2nd of next month? Do you want to go with us?" Gu Shengyin was, of course, willing. The underground Colosseum was one of the darkest places in the King City of Carter. It was open to the public once a month, and they would put carefully selected slaves and hand-raised magical beasts to duel, providing entertainment for the nobles. The top nobles of the empire would not like such a place, but they would not forbid their children from going there to broaden their horizons. Every warrior would yearn for a battle of blood and strength in their bones. Gu Shengyin was no exception. What's more, for the noble ladies who lived in comfortable castles, it was their nature to pursue excitement. Seeing Gu Shengyi nod, Lilith was very excited. Then it's a deal. It's a day off at the academy. We'll pick you up in the morning. Eve Heiss felt very tired. The man in the necklace seemed to be in a hurry. She spent almost all her time on the road except for eating and resting. Finally, she arrived at the King City yesterday, but she was teased and teased by a group of noble youths. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore, and used the magic taught by the man in the necklace to hit one of them. She didn't expect to cause such a mess. That noble's son died on the spot. She had also been chased for an entire day and night, and only now did she have a moment to catch her breath. She leaned against the wall, leaning against the wall, and she leaned against the wall. The man in the necklace said, "You've already shaken them off." Eve Heather was relieved. She still had a lot of faith in the ability of this mysterious sir. As soon as she relaxed, the fatigue in her body overwhelmed her, and she felt a little drowsy. "Someone's coming," a low voice said. Eve Heiss opened her eyes almost instantly. The alertness in her bones allowed her to react in an instant. "It's not the group that chased you." Eve curled up her body and hid in the corner. She looked no different from a beggar on the street. She hoped that these people would not notice her. But things didn't always go as planned. Chapter 68. Damn it! That little slave ran away. If we can't get him back today, we'll probably be slaughtered when we go back. A big man cursed. They were all guards of the underground Colosseum. During this time, they were preparing for the duel at the end of next month. Who would have thought that today, a little slave, who was used as a sacrifice, would break through layers of obstacles and run out? They were responsible for guarding. If they were found to have lost someone, the consequences would not be good. "Hey! Look!" One of them found Eve huddled in the corner. Another one instantly understood what he meant. Anyway, they were all slaves used as cannon fodder. As long as the number was right, no one would pay attention to what a slave looked like. "What are you doing?" "Let me go." Eve Taylor had never expected that this group of people would target her. "Boy, don't be nervous. We'll take you to a good place. I promise you'll eat and drink well." She would be obedient for a few days so that she could be the food for the treasure of the Colosseum. "Don't resist. Follow them." The mysterious man's voice suddenly came into Eve's ears. The mysterious man had his own considerations. He had lost a lot of strength. With Eve's skills, there was no way to escape from these people. It was better to follow them first. He could take advantage of this time to recover his strength. When the time came, he would have more confidence to take her away. Eve obediently quieted down. Those big men thought that their words had convinced the little beggar, and they exchanged a smile with each other. Soon, it was the second day. On this day, Gu Shengyin got up early to do morning exercises as usual, and then had breakfast with her parents. Soon after the meal, the housekeeper came and said that the carriage of the Bill family was parked outside the Duke's mansion. "Good day, Your Excellency the Duke." "Good day, beautiful Duchess." Lilith gave a standard salute to the Duke couple. Mrs. Roman's beautiful face was full of smiles. She liked such a warm little girl like Lilith. Sometimes, when she thought of her daughter and her husband's cold little face, she always felt sad. "Good day, Lilith. Did you come to see our Nika?" she asked in a gentle tone. Lilith looked a little reserved. "Yes, madam. We agreed to go out together today." "All right then, Nika. Are you ready?" "Don't keep your friend waiting too long," said the Duchess. "Mom, I'm ready," Gu Shengyin replied. They said goodbye to the Duke and his wife, and got into the carriage. When Gu Shengyin and Lilith could no longer be seen, the Duchess complained to her husband, "Look, it's all because of your cold face. Look at how scared the little girl is. What a sprightly girl she is. Poor Lilith." The Duke looked at his wife helplessly. "Nana, you know I didn't do it on purpose." The Duchess winked mischievously. Then the great Duke of White rose. "Why don't you smile?" "Duke, Lilith pulled Gu Shengyin into the carriage. "You scared me to death." Lilith patted her chest exaggeratedly. "Every time I see the Duke, I'm more scared than when I see the supervising elder." The supervising elder was the strictest old man in the Carter Royal Academy. He was in charge of student discipline in the academy. He always wore a meticulous black robe, and his wrinkled face always had a mocking expression. He was the last person the students wanted to see. Chapter 69. Gu Shengyin silently lit a candle for his father. He's such a handsome and charming duke, yet he's being compared to the supervising elder. She looked at Lilith seriously. "Don't talk about father like that. He is very good to people." Lilith silently imagined the interaction between Veronica and the Duke. The two expressionless people looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. She felt a little cold just thinking about it. Looking at her best friend's expressionless face, which had begun to show the trademark of the Duchess of White Rose, Lilith felt that she had a heavy responsibility. She wanted to change her best friend's personality, which happened to be the same as the Duchess. The carriage stopped at a place, and Lilith and Gu Shengyin got off the carriage. They saw two young men waiting on the side of the road on horses. One of them was Lilith's brother, Kyle Bill, and the other was his friend. "Brother Kyle." "Joey." Lilith ran over and greeted the two. "This is my good friend, Veronica Roman of the Roman family." Both of them looked at Gu Shengyin in surprise. They had heard of the Pearl of the Empire, but this was the first time they saw Gu Shengyin in person. "Good day, Princess Roman." The two of them bowed to Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin nodded and said, "We are all friends here to play. There is no need to pay attention to these formalities." The sun shone on Gu Shengyin's face, making the girl's face even more dazzling. Along the way, Joey and Bill were extra attentive to Gu Shengyin. In their teens, the most straightforward way for these young men to recognize a girl was her appearance. "We're here." The four of them didn't wear clothes embroidered with their family emblems. Gu Shengyin even wore a cloak. The green eyes of the Roman family were too unique and had to be covered. Bill handed the invitation letter in his hand to the gatekeeper and entered the Colosseum without any problems. Everything here seemed to be out of place in the king's city. Lilith and the others were amazed. The royal city in their eyes was filled with riches, prosperity, and a life of luxury. But here, the surrounding environment gave off a gloomy and damp feeling, and the people coming and going all had gloomy expressions. However, all of this made them even more excited. It was as if they were going on an exciting adventure in an unfamiliar place. Gu Shengyin, on the other hand, had a bad premonition. Her intuition had always been accurate. In the previous world, when Cheng Yiru was taking revenge on the Cheng family, she had the same feeling. Soon, this premonition was confirmed. The system suddenly said, "The underground Colosseum has found the existence of a plot character, Eve Heather." Gu Shengyin was surprised. "Isn't it supposed to be 2 years before she comes to the capital?" The system said, "Maybe the host's arrival changed the plot." Gu Shengyin suddenly remembered the cause of Veronica's death in the original plot. She suddenly said, "Is it too late for me to leave now?" She didn't want to face the demon king who had lived for 10,000 years. Lilith and the others were puzzled by Gu Shengyin's sudden desire to leave, but seeing her insistence, they could only let her be. The gatekeeper of the Colosseum regretfully said that before the battle ended, all guests were not allowed to leave. Gu Shengyin's heart went cold. She couldn't force it. The only thing she could do now was to pray that the Demon King would not discover her existence. Chapter 70. The Demon King only felt that his heart was beating very fast, if he still had that thing. The feeling that had been with him since he woke up had become unprecedentedly strong after coming to the king's city, and today, it had reached its peak. He felt that his entire soul was trembling. He could feel that the thing he had been longing for was already in front of him. He was going to find her. Eve only felt that the necklace's heat was a bit scorching. "Is that person all right?" she thought uneasily. After all, in this strange place, That mysterious stranger was her only guarantee. Quick, quick, quick. You all move faster. The battle is about to start. Lord Barton has already finished warming up. It's time to put these little guys up. Eve had indeed been well taken care of by the people in the underground Colosseum these past few days, but she also understood where this place was. Don't worry, I will help you when the time comes. When it's chaotic, you can take the opportunity to quietly escape. The Demon King comforted her. Soon, Eve and more than 10 youths of similar age were driven into a huge iron cage. At first, these youths were a little confused, but when they saw the huge iron cage, the bloodstains on the ground, and the excited spectators on the stands outside, a few of them suddenly understood where they were, and their expressions immediately became desperate. They wanted to escape, but the cage was already locked. This cage was made of special steel, and with just the few of them, it was impossible to break it. Roar! A huge roar came, and 4 big men appeared on the left side of the Colosseum. They were carrying a cage on their shoulders, and inside the cage was a huge tiger-type magical beast. Let us welcome the king of the King City Underground Colosseum, the 6th-rank magical beast, Thunderwing Tiger. The host said loudly with an excited expression. The atmosphere of the scene was pushed to a climax. Many nobles waved the things in their hands, and their expressions were faintly crazy. In the iron cage, Eve's face suddenly became pale. At this time, even the slowest person understood their fate. At the same time, a person came out from the right side of the Colosseum. This man only had a simple cloth around his waist, and his whole body was muscular. He waved his hand at the audience. The audience screamed again. Let us welcome the hero of the underground Colosseum, Barton the Violent Lion. Barton! Barton! Gu Shengyin was a little surprised. Most of the people sitting here were nobles. She really did not expect that those nobles, who were usually well-dressed and well-mannered, would have such a crazy side. She took a closer look at Barton. He was a great swordsman, just like her. Gu Shengyin was a little surprised. With the cultivation of a great swordsman, he could find a decent and good job anywhere. Why would anyone want to come to a place where life and death were a constant threat? While Gu Shengyin was thinking, the huge thunder-winged lion had already been placed into the iron cage. Ah! Screams rang out, and the children all ran towards the furthest corner of the thunder-winged lion. However, this was of no use. The entire cage was only so big. A bloodthirsty look flashed across the thunder-winged lion's eyes. In a flash, it arrived in front of the nearest youth. Then, it opened its mouth, revealing its sharp teeth. Chapter 71. Eve Heiss was stunned. She could clearly feel the warm blood splattering on her face. She had never felt as close to death as she did now. What are you waiting for? The mysterious man's cold voice sounded in her mind. She came back to her senses and forced herself not to look at the broken body on the ground. She gritted her teeth and ran to the side. Gu Shengyin was stunned. She thought that the Colosseum was only a battle between magical beasts and warriors. She didn't expect that there would be such a one-sided massacre. The dozen or so youths in the cage had no room to fight back against the Thunderwing beast. It was insane. The people around seemed to be unaware of this. Gu Shengyin saw that many people were intoxicated because of this, and the atmosphere became more lively. Don't you think this is cruel? She asked. Lilith's face was pale. She was obviously frightened. Her brother, Kyle, looked at Gu Shengyin strangely. This is the usual practice of the Colosseum. Before the official battle, there will be a temporary warm-up. It is also to give the audience a thrill. Only blood and death can give people the most direct impact, isn't it? Gu Shengyin looked at Kyle, who was smiling gently, and said such cruel words casually. She felt a chill in her heart. She wanted to stop it, but the system warned her sternly, "Host, the Colosseum is a normal setting in the original plot. Host should not destroy it." Gu Shengyin could only give up. Her attention was also attracted by another figure in the cage. It was a skinny young man who was running around in the cage, dodging the sharp teeth of the Thunderwing beast time and time again. Gu Shengyin knew that it was Eve Heiss, the person who indirectly killed Veronica in the original plot. Eve only heard the mysterious man say in her mind, "Relax, don't resist." She did as she was told and realized that her body was actually out of her control. She could see that she was cleverly dodging the Thunderwing beast's attacks with her seemingly limping footsteps again and again. "A mere Tier 6 reptile dares to be impudent in front of me." The mysterious person snorted coldly, the disdain in his tone not concealed in the slightest. Eve felt a surge of hot blood in her chest. Was this what it meant to be strong? Even a powerful magical beast like the Thunderwing beast was nothing more than a little worm in his eyes. Gu Shengyin looked at the scene. She was not worried about Eve Heather at all. With the Devil King, who had lived for 10,000 years, it would be difficult for her to die even if she wanted to. The Demon King in the field had a strange feeling. It was as if someone was watching him, and that person was the reason why he had been unable to calm down, the reason why he had been so eager to rush to the royal capital. His divine sense swept across the audience and quickly locked onto a place. There was a figure in a black cloak. His face could not be seen, but judging from his figure, he should still be in the growth stage of a human. The Demon King only felt that his soul was about to burn. He wanted to go to the figure's side and lift his cloak to see who it was that could affect him so deeply. There was only one survivor left in the field, and that was Eve Heather, whose body was being controlled by the Demon King. Every time people thought that she was about to be buried in the tiger's mouth, this small figure always managed to escape by the skin of her teeth. This could not go on. Sooner or later, the clues would be found out. The Demon King's expression turned cold. Chapter 72. In a place where no one could see, the eyes of the girl who was running for her life suddenly turned into a pure black color, as if an endless whirlpool was condensing in her eyes. When the thunder-winged lion met her eyes, its body suddenly stagnated for a moment. Then, it suddenly roared towards the sky and its body suddenly grew bigger. "Oh no, that thunder-winged lion has gone crazy." The host suddenly panicked. As soon as he finished speaking, the cage made of secret steel was knocked open by the thunder-winged lion, who had lost all sense of reason. The thunder-winged lion went straight towards the audience. That place was filled with the underground Colosseum's distinguished guests, and there was no lack of distinguished guests. If anything happened, no matter how powerful the underground Colosseum was, there would be no small amount of trouble. Several figures flew towards the thunder-winged lion. They were the underground Colosseum's consecrators. These strong people were all supported by the underground Colosseum at a huge cost. Usually, there were very few opportunities for them to fight. But at this time, only they could suppress the thunder-winged lion. The thunder-winged lion was quickly subdued. But how could the Demon King let them off so easily? The little slave who had been lying on the ground with no one knew if he was dead or alive, had a mysterious smile on his face. At the same time, the underground Colosseum was filled with the roars of magical beasts. The magical beasts were going crazy. Countless magical beasts ran out of their cages and bit everyone they saw. They were originally the overlords of the forest and grassland. But they were forcefully captured by these humans and sold to this place to fight for their lives for the entertainment of others. One could imagine the resentment in their hearts. The underground Colosseum was in a mess at this moment. The nobles were all pale and wanted to escape. But at this time, there were crazy magical beasts everywhere. If they were not careful, they could be bitten by the rioting magical beasts. Gu Shengyin and the rest walked together towards the exit of the Colosseum. "Ah!" A familiar voice was heard. Gu Shengyin looked back and saw a noble lady in red sitting on the ground. Beside her was a guard who was lying in a pool of blood. Obviously, he could no longer protect his master. Joanna could already smell the fishy smell coming from the magical beast's mouth. She closed her eyes in despair. However, the expected pain did not appear. She opened her eyes and saw a golden sword light cutting the demonic beast in half. "Miss Raymond, is your magic staff just for decoration?" Gu Shengyin sternly shouted at her. "You Chow Anna looked at Gu Shengyin blankly. She did not expect that Gu Shengyin would save her. Get up, Miss Raymond. We don't have much time to waste on the ground. Chow Anna stared blankly at the hand in front of her. She pursed her lips and stood up with Gu Shengyin's hand. She lowered her head and thanked Gu Shengyin. A faint smile appeared on Gu Shengyin's face, which was hidden under the cloak. In the original novel, Chow Anna was not a bad girl. She was just a little girl who was spoiled by her family. When he saw her, he thought of Chang Shiji, the original host in the previous world. The original group of 4 became a group of 5 people. Fortunately, they were either warriors or magicians. The level of these crazy magical beasts was not too high. Finally, they arrived at the entrance of the Colosseum without any accident. Just when Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief, a small figure suddenly rushed towards her at a very fast speed. Chapter 73. Although the figure was extremely fast, that was only for ordinary people. For a great swordsman like Gu Shengyin, it was nothing. However, Gu Shengyin did not manage to dodge the seemingly slow collision. She took 2 steps back and was supported by Joanna, who was standing behind her. The cloak that had been covering her face fell off. However, the figure was knocked to the ground by the force of the collision. Gu Shengyin's expression changed. The figure was Eve Heather. The Demon King deliberately bumped into her. The cloaked figure looked like a noble. With Eve's identity, if she missed this chance, she did not know when she would meet her again. She could only think of a way. The moment Gu Shengyin's cloak fell off, the Demon King felt that his heart was in his mouth. He hated those dazzling colors the most, but he felt that the girl in front of him, with her long golden hair, was so charming. Her beautiful green eyes, and her delicate lips, no matter how he looked at it, she looked like someone from the light camp, which he hated the most. However, the Demon King only felt his heart beat when he looked at her. I fell into the trap of the goddess of love. The Demon King thought. He had lived for more than 10,000 years, and this was the first time he was moved by a human who looked so small. What reason should he find to follow her? The Demon King thought quickly in his heart, and from the corner of his eye, he saw a monster rushing towards them. Gu Shengyin watched as the tiny figure stood in front of him and was stabbed in the thigh by the armored rhinoceros. She opened her eyes wide in confusion. What is happening? The Demon King got what he wanted. The White Rose family's upbringing would not allow Gu Shengyin to ignore her savior. She brought the injured Eve Heather back to the Duke's mansion. When the Duchess saw her daughter come back with a person covered in blood, she was almost scared to death. She was only relieved after Gu Shengyin briefly explained to her. She was also very grateful to her daughter's benefactor. She personally arranged for Eve to stay in the guest's room and invited the most famous doctor in the palace to treat her daughter. Gu Shengyin was not in a good state at the moment. She looked at the strange man who suddenly appeared in her room with vigilance. "Who are you?" she asked coldly. Of course, Gu Shengyin knew who he was, but she never thought that the Devil King would appear so quickly. Could it be that he actually wanted to make a move in the Duke's mansion? She placed her hand on the protective enchantment in the space ring. Her godfather, the Archbishop of the Carter Empire, had personally set it up for her. The Demon King pretended not to see her little action. He just looked greedily at Gu Shengyin with an unfathomable smile in his eyes. "What a cute little girl. Are you willing to sign a contract with me?" Gu Shengyin called out to the system, "This is different from the plot. Isn't it Eve Heather who signed the contract with him?" The system was also confused. The Demon King saw Gu Shengyin's vigilance, and he was a little annoyed. In his heart, this little girl should not show such an expression to him. She should be looking at him with eyes full of trust and dependence, and her eyes were full of him. "You have no other choice but to sign a contract with me. Otherwise, you can imagine the lives of the entire White Rose Duke's mansion." Chapter 74. Gu Shengyin knew how cruel the Demon King was, although she felt strange that he did not directly ask for her soul but wanted to sign a contract with her. The Demon King saw that Gu Shengyin agreed and was very satisfied. He called out to Gu Shengyin, "Come here." Gu Shengyin walked forward. The Demon King reached out an illusory hand and touched Gu Shengyin's forehead, his mouth chanting a mysterious rune. A black fog gushed out from the Demon King's mouth and slowly wrapped around Gu Shengyin's body. Gu Shengyin was surprised to find that the discomfort she imagined did not appear. She remembered that in the original plot, when Eve Heather and the Demon King signed a master-slave contract, it was very painful. The system said, "Of course you won't feel any pain, what you both signed just now was a symbiotic contract." Gu Shengyin said, "Oh, so that's how it is. Wait, what did you just say? Symbiotic contract?" Gu Shengyin was really surprised. The symbiotic contract in this world was not a joke, it was just like its name, symbiotic. Both parties who signed the contract would be one body, you live and I live, you die and I die. Could it be that this Demon King had misread the incantation? The Demon King looked at the serious girl who was looking at him with a blank expression. "Why?" Gu Shengyin asked, "Why did you sign a symbiotic contract with me?" She did not believe that the Demon King would be so kind. The Demon King held his chin. "Maybe it's because you're too beautiful, I fell in love with you at first sight." Gu Shengyin's answer was to roll her eyes. "Take it." A necklace flew into Gu Shengyin's arms. The necklace was a dark diamond-shaped crystal. The chain was made of an unknown material. It shone like stars. "My soul is now living in this necklace. You have to take good care of it." Gu Shengyin would have taken good care of it even if he did not say anything. After all, their lives were connected. She had to cherish her own life. She still had to find her lover in the future. The Demon King's next action once again broke Gu Shengyin's understanding. "Looking for the fountain of life?" The Demon King nodded calmly. "My physical body has long been burned to ashes. Now, only my soul remains imprisoned in this bright light chain. Naturally, I need the spring of life to nourish my soul and create a new body." Gu Shengyin was surprised again. "System, didn't the Demon King to recover quickly by devouring the souls of the living? Why are you taking the moderate path now?" "System, there are too many illogical things in this world. The problem is that it can't find any reason." Seeing that the system remained silent, Gu Shengyin understood. This meant that the system could not answer her for the time being. Regardless, to Shengyin's the demon, it was a good thing. As a symbiotic contract for a symbiotic contract as a symbiosis contract to, would not, as a symbiotic contract she. When Eve woke up, the scene in front of her made her dizzy. She had never seen such a bright and beautiful room, and had never slept on such a soft and fragrant bed. The pain from her thigh told her that this was not a dream. Subconsciously, she reached out to grab the necklace on her neck. Unexpectedly, it was empty. Eve immediately panicked. She struggled to get up. "Miss, you're awake? Is there anything I can do for you?" The maid who heard the commotion and walked in was shocked to see Eve like this. Chapter 75. Where's my necklace? Did you see it? Eve asked anxiously. "It's a black diamond-shaped necklace, about this big." She gestured. The maid was puzzled. "We cleaned your body and bandaged your wounds, but we didn't see the necklace you mentioned." Eve's heart was cold. During this time, she had been used to relying on that mysterious lord. Now that he had suddenly disappeared, she felt empty in her heart. "Your Highness." At this time, the maid suddenly bowed in a direction with a respectful expression. Eve looked up and was stunned for a moment. Other than that lord, she had never seen such a good-looking person. No, the two were obviously very different. That lord's appearance was like a seductive but fatal flower, tempting ignorant mortals to fall. But this lord was like the embodiment of God's light in the human world, beautiful, pure, noble and inviolable. Gu Shengyin asked the maid to leave, and she took out the necklace from the space ring. Eve's mind was immediately attracted. "Eve." Black smoke gushed out from the necklace and turned into the handsome man in the air. "Your Highness." Eve was happy. The Demon King did not say anything, and pointed at Eve's forehead. "This is the way I promised you to improve your aptitude." Eve instantly understood what he meant. She was a little flustered. "Your Highness, are you leaving?" The Demon King looked at the expressionless Gu Shengyin and smiled deeply. "I found the person I'm looking for." Eve glanced at Gu Shengyin and suddenly realized what was going on. At that time, the reason why the Demon King had been urging her to come to the King's city was because of this lord. Eve felt a little lost, but she also understood that the Demon King did not owe her anything. On the contrary, he had helped her a lot along the way. She was in no position to ask him to stay. Gu Shengyin spoke. "Are you willing to stay in the Duke's mansion?" She had her own selfish motives. After Eve Heather's talent had been modified, her talent could be said to be monstrous. If such a person were to become a member of the Duke's mansion, she would be of great help in the future. This was a pleasant surprise for Eve. When she first came to the royal city, she didn't know anyone and was worried about finding a place to stay. She agreed to Gu Shengyin's suggestion without much hesitation. The Demon King also made Eve swear an oath that she would not reveal anything about him to anyone. Although Eve didn't know who His Excellency was, she could tell from his appearance that he wasn't a simple character. She didn't object to this oath. It was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. She would bury His Excellency's existence in the deepest corner of her memory in the future. At night, Gu Shengyin came out of the shower and wiped her wet hair with a towel. "My dear, you smell so good." The Demon King took a deep breath, pretending to be intoxicated. Gu Shengyin was already used to his behavior. He couldn't touch her anyway. "Your Excellency Demon King, please conduct yourself with dignity." Because of the symbiotic contract, the Demon King's identity was not concealed. Gu Shengyin also doubted whether this person was her lover. But when she thought about her previous two lives, whether it was Ji Yu or Yuan Su, they were both overbearing and gentle. But the Demon King in front of her was clearly a frivolous old hooligan. Chapter 76. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, Gu Shengyin had graduated from Carter Royal Academy. It had been 3 years since she met the Demon King. There were countless treasures in the Duke's mansion. The Demon King's recovery speed was amazing. He could even transform into a real body for a short time. He just needed to find the spring of life and build a new body. Then, he could return to his peak strength. Today was the graduation ball of Carter Royal Academy. 3 years was enough time for Veronica to grow from a young girl to a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. She was the pearl of the empire. However, this beauty was too cold and arrogant. Her strength was too domineering. Gu Shengyin graduated from the Royal Academy as the top student in her year. The Carter Royal Academy even made an exception to create a statue for her in the academy. This was an honor that only those who had made great contributions to the academy could enjoy. There was only one reason for Gu Shengyin's statue to appear here. Her talent was amazing. A 16-year-old legendary swordswoman. No one doubted that this girl would become another sword saint of the Carter Empire. Gu Shengyin was not interested in dancing. Except for the opening dance, she had been sitting there the whole time. This was the 10th person she had refused. Gu Shengyin knew that some bored noble boys must be betting on who could ask her out. "Nika." A pleasant male voice sounded. It was the second prince. The second prince, who was already an adult, was already a handsome man. He was wearing a white ceremonial robe that represented the royal family. The military uniform made his figure look even more tall and straight. It was unknown how many noble ladies' gazes were fixed on him. "You've broken the hearts of many men tonight," the second prince joked. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. There are also many girls who want to be the second prince's wife who are secretly sad. The second prince looked at Gu Shengyin, who was serious even when she was joking, and felt helpless. Then, "Beautiful Miss Roman, would you like to dance with me?" The second prince's expression was calm, but his expectant eyes betrayed his thoughts. Gu Shengyin shook her head. "Sorry." In the beginning, she had also suspected that it was the second prince, But after so many times of approaching him, she did not smell the familiar lotus fragrance from the second prince, nor did she feel the feeling that made her heart beat faster from him. Since there wouldn't be any results, she shouldn't give him any hope. The second prince left with a gloomy look in his eyes. Gu Shengyin ate the fruit alone. Suddenly, the aura around her changed. A certain demon king was sitting beside her. "Are you crazy? Show yourself here!" Gu Shengyin shouted. Over the past 3 years, she and the demon king had gotten along rather well. Although the demon king she knew was a little thick-skinned, he wasn't as cruel and bloodthirsty as described in the plot. The demon king would often teach her some swordsmanship or other things that had been lost on the continent. She was able to improve so quickly in 3 years because of the demon king. The relationship between the two was like that of a teacher and a friend. In Gu Shengyin's heart, the demon king was already someone she cared about. The demon king coldly looked at the teenagers who were staring at Gu Shengyin. He casually replied, "Don't worry, these people won't be able to discover my existence." He really couldn't help it. His little girl was too charming, attracting too many wild bees and butterflies. Chapter 77. However, he did not know if it was because he had always acted too unreliable, but no matter what he said, Gu Shengyin only took it as a joke. "Like now," the demon king said, "so many little brats are thinking about you, how can I hold back?" Gu Shengyin's response was to ignore this sentence. The devil was a little angry. "Veronica!" A bright figure appeared in Gu Shengyin's vision. Joanna sat down beside her. Joanna had now grown into a young lady. She was tall and slender, and unlike Gu Shengyin's exquisite features, she had a beautiful face. She was like a blooming red plum, and there were many followers behind her. Joanna's attitude towards Gu Shengyin changed a lot since Gu Shengyin saved her from the demon beast 3 years ago. Although her words were still unforgiving, Gu Shengyin could feel Joanna's kindness towards him. Joanna looked at Gu Shengyin, who was leisurely eating fruit, with some envy. "I really envy you. You are the only successor of the Duke's mansion. You will never have my troubles." Gu Shengyin understood why Joanna was sighing. She was the youngest daughter of the Minister of Finance. Although she was very spoiled at home, she was a child of a noble family. When necessary, she had to contribute her own strength to the family. For example, marriage. Joanna's eyes were a little lonely. "My family has made a decision. If I can't win the heart of the second prince, next year, I will have to choose one of the noble sons to be my husband." Joanna of the Raymond family liked the second prince of the royal family. This was known in the noble circle of the empire. It was also an open secret that the second prince had been chasing after the heir of the White Rose family, Veronica Roman. Joanna Raymond and Veronica Roman were actually good friends, which made many people's jaws drop. Gu Shengyin thought for a long time and finally said, "There are plenty of fish in the sea. Joanna, you have to be more optimistic. Maybe your destined knight is waiting for you not far away." Joanna burst into laughter. She looked at Veronica's serious look, and the melancholy in her heart suddenly disappeared. Although he didn't quite understand the meaning behind Veronica's words, it was obvious that she didn't take the second prince seriously. She even had some malicious thoughts in her heart. "Second prince, look, you turned a blind eye to my sincerity. Now, your sincerity is nothing in Veronica's eyes." Is this what the priest meant by reincarnation? Gu Shengyin didn't understand why Chow Anna seemed to be in a good mood in an instant, but it was a good thing. Veronica's eyes looked around aimlessly. Suddenly, her eyes stopped at one place and couldn't move away. It was a man with long black hair. His hair was loosely tied up with a silver ribbon. His facial features were not as deep as the people of the Cat Empire. Instead, they were soft and gentle. He was standing there chatting with someone with a gentle smile on his face. Gu Shengyin was familiar with that face. She could draw that face with her eyes closed. It was Ji Yu's face in the first world. Joanna saw that Gu Shengyin's expression wasn't right. She followed her gaze and showed a knowing smile. "That's the army commander of the Sacred Alliance, Sir Lin Chi. He's a gentleman. Before she could finish, Gu Shengyin got up and walked over. Chapter 78. Joanna was a little dumbfounded. She had known Veronica for so many years, but she had never seen her so anxious. Could this be the legendary love at first sight? Gu Shengyin was so focused on looking for the person who looked exactly like Ji Yu that she didn't notice that the man she had forgotten had a dark expression on his face. Joanna felt a little cold for some reason. Gu Shengyin eagerly walked through the laughing crowd to look at the place where the man had appeared. Unfortunately, when she got there, it was already empty. Gu Shengyin felt lost. She turned to grab the hand of a noble lady and asked, "Where did the man who was standing here go?" "The one with black hair." The noble lady saw her and hurriedly bowed. After hearing her question, she chuckled and said, "Are you talking about Mr. Lin Chi? Someone was looking for him just now, and he left early." Gu Shengyin walked back in a daze. Joanna looked at her and teased, "What's the matter? You didn't see him? Don't tell me you fell in love with him at first sight?" She had just been joking. She hadn't expected Gu Shengyin to not deny it. Joanna was shocked. "Are you serious? The nobles of the Carter Empire who are chasing you can line up outside the capital. You actually fell in love with an outsider. If this was known by Veronica's suitors, wouldn't they be extremely depressed?" Gu Shengyin was a little uninterested for the rest of the night, so she didn't notice the devil's unusual silence. It wasn't until night fell that Gu Shengyin, who had just closed the door, was pressed against the door by a strong force. "You!" Gu Shengyin looked at the man who had imprisoned her with some surprise. The devil's expression was very bad, especially when he saw Gu Shengyin's confused look, which made him even angrier. Since he didn't know what to say, he had to take action. When the devil's kiss fell, Gu Shengyin was dizzy. What kind of development was this? Her confused expression probably pleased the Demon King, and the originally aggressive attack became gentle. The Devil King gently rubbed Gu Shengyin's lips and patiently coaxed, "Be good, open your mouth." Gu Shengyin's dizzy mind became clear because of this sentence. She struggled with all her might. "Let go of me." The Devil King's expression became gloomy again because of her resistance. He restrained Gu Shengyin's waving hands and no longer held back. The tip of his tongue opened her teeth and went straight in, kissing her thoroughly. By the time he loosened his grip, Gu Shengyin was already weak all over. However, in the next second, a golden sword beam lit up in the darkness. Although the Demon King's movements were fast, his face was still cut by the sword beam. "If there's a next time, I'll slit your throat." Gu Shengyin looked at him coldly. The Demon King didn't care about her words at all. He just looked at her and said, "Don't look at other men like that. I can't help killing him." Hearing this, Gu Shengyin glanced at him and said, "Then I'll kill you too." The Demon King smiled gently. "That's good. I'm willing to die with you." Gu Shengyin thought, "Damn the symbiotic contract." The dispute in the evening ended when the Demon King couldn't maintain his body. After several days, Gu Shengyin didn't see him again. On this day, Chow Anna brought a message to Gu Shengyin, saying that there would be a banquet to welcome the guests of the Sacred Alliance in a few days. Gu Shengyin certainly wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Chapter 79. That day, Gu Shengyin specially dressed up and came to the banquet hall. She was a little excited, hoping that Lin Chi was the lover she had been looking for. But on the other hand, she felt a little guilty when she thought of the man in the necklace. Shaking off the inexplicable thoughts in her mind, Gu Shengyin found Lin Chi standing on the balcony with a glass of wine. "Why are you here alone, Sir Lin Chi?" Gu Shengyin walked up to him. Lin Chi turned around when he heard the voice. The moment he saw Gu Shengyin, a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. "Hello, noble Princess Roman." Gu Shengyin tilted her head slightly and asked curiously, "How did you know it was me?" Lin Chi smiled gently. Other than Princess Roman, known as the Pearl of the Carter Empire, Who else would have this beauty that is favored by the gods? Gu Shengyin raised the glass in his hand and clinked it with him happily. Lin Qi looked at her mesmerizing blonde hair sliding down the side of her face. Her emerald green eyes were like a pool of clear water. This dreamlike beautiful woman suddenly cried out and fell in his direction. How could he refuse a beauty throwing herself at him? If Lin Qi had some doubts before, he was now sure that the Pearl of the Carter Empire had different thoughts about him. How could a legendary swordsman trip over his own dress? Lin Qi had a sense of pride that only belonged to men. He had long heard rumors about Princess Roman. She was often mentioned together with her beauty because she was as cold as ice. Now it seemed that the rumors could not be trusted. However, Gu Shengyin was very disappointed. Without that familiar smell, he was not him. Before Lin Qi could say anything, she stood up and tidied up her skirt. "I'm really sorry, Sir Lin Qi. I was rude just now," Gu Shengyin apologized. Lin Qi felt that the woman in front of him had changed in an instant. Just a moment ago, she was still chatting happily with him. Just as he was about to take the next step, she expressionlessly said goodbye. It was as if the hug just now was just a soft dream. Gu Shengyin was filled with disappointment. She just wanted to leave as soon as possible. She nodded at Lin Qi and turned around. He fell into a cold embrace. "You." Gu Shengyin looked at the man who shouldn't have appeared in this place in shock. "Darling, why didn't you tell me you were coming out?" The man held her waist and lowered his head to whisper in her ear, but his voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone's eyes were on the two of them. After all, Gu Shengyin's family background and appearance made her the center of attention wherever she went. And a certain demon king was the only one who could compare to Gu Shengyin in terms of appearance. When the two of them stood together, they would definitely make everyone else look like dust. "What do you want now?" Gu Shengyin gritted her teeth and whispered, pulling the man outside. The man didn't resist and obediently followed her. In the eyes of outsiders, they were a perfect match, whispering intimately as they left. These people were all guessing who this mysterious man was. After all, with such an appearance and aura, it was impossible for him to be a nameless existence. "Why are you here? And dressed like this?" Gu Shengyin looked at him. The Demon King said lazily, "My future wife is going to leave with someone else. How can I sit still?" Chapter 80. For the first time, Gu Shengyin looked at the man seriously. "I have a lover, really." The Demon King didn't believe it. Since she was 13 years old, he had always been the one by her side. But her tone was so certain. When she talked about her lover, even her eyes seemed to be shining. The Demon King was silent. Just when Gu Shengyin thought he was going to give up, he suddenly said, "Where is your lover?" Gu Shengyin was speechless. After a while she said, "I'm looking for him." The Demon King thought of Gu Shengyin and that man when he entered the banquet hall. "So you threw yourself into the arms of that strange man today because you thought he was your lover?" Gu Shengyin nodded. The Demon King almost laughed. "You don't even know what he looks like. How can you be so sure that he is your lover?" Gu Shengyin didn't want to talk to him. She couldn't tell anyone about this. Even if she told them, no one would believe in something as strange as time travel. The Demon King didn't give up. "Then why are you looking for him?" "Let me guess. You mistook him for someone else, so it shouldn't be because of his appearance. Then, is it because of his smell? Or a mark on his body? Or is it some kind of mysterious but not mysterious special feeling?" Gu Shengyin thought that he had guessed 80 to 90% of the time. At this moment, a cold and fragrant embrace covered her. A domineering kiss fell on Gu Shengyin's lips. The Demon King's kiss was irresistible. "Then feel it carefully. Is your lover me?" Gu Shengyin pushed him away. "Enough. I'm very sure that it's not you." After that, she left without looking back. "Your Excellency?" The Demon King turned around. It was Eve, who looked surprised. Eve's life in the Duke's mansion was good. In the past 3 years, She had grown a lot taller and was a beautiful girl. "Is it really you?" Eve trotted over. "Have you recovered?" The Demon King shook his head. "It's only temporary." Eve looked at him. She had a lot to say, but she couldn't say a word. "You saw everything?" the Demon King suddenly asked. Eve nodded. She saw His Highness push him away, but His Highness didn't see it. When she turned to leave, the man's cynical smile disappeared, and his expression was so sad. "Then help me keep an eye on her," the man suddenly said. "What?" Eve was confused. "After a while, I'll be going out. Don't let other men get close to her while I'm away." Eve nodded. Gu Shengyin had been feeling strange for the past 2 days. She always felt that something was missing from her side. It was not until Qiao Anna mentioned what happened that day that she realized that the Devil King had not appeared for several days. Could it be that she was angry with him? Gu Shengyin couldn't help but shudder at the thought of an old monster who had lived for 10,000 years sulking. 2 days later, Gu Shengyin couldn't take it anymore. She decided to admit defeat first. However, no man appeared from the space ring. Gu Shengyin was keenly aware that something was wrong. She used her spiritual power and found that there was no trace of the man in the space ring. Did that man just leave quietly like that? Gu Shengyin didn't believe that the man would leave. However, after 1 or 2 days, 10 days, half a month, she was sure that the Devil King had really left. For some reason, Gu Shengyin, who should have been relieved, felt a little wronged. He left without even saying goodbye. Chapter 81. When the man was still there, she didn't think he was important. Even affected by the original plot, she wanted to stay away from him. But now that the man really left, Gu Shengyin found that she wasn't used to it. When she practiced swordsmanship, there was no one to guide her step by step. There was no one to say that he liked her every day in a joking tone. She also didn't feel at ease because she knew that person would always be by her side. Gu Shengyin thought about it and felt that she was quite a scumbag. Since she couldn't respond to him, it seemed that it was good that the Demon King left her. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. In the past 6 months, Gu Shengyin focused on practicing and improving her strength. She even lost interest in finding her lover. Speaking of which, this world really didn't have any pressure. The original Veronica Roman's soul was forcibly extracted by the Demon King because he fancied her. But according to Gu Shengyin's understanding, it was impossible for the Demon King to do such a thing. Eve Heather, who was originally a cannon fodder, had also become a female guard of the Duke of White Rose's residence. Then she just needed to be at ease as Veronica Roman and live out her life in this world according to the original plan. Thinking about it, Gu Shengyin suddenly felt a pain in her heart. It was as if someone had cut out a piece of flesh from her heart with a knife. It was the symbiotic contract. The moment she bent down, Gu Shengyin understood the source of the sudden pain, the symbiotic contract she signed with the Demon King. Then, this meant that the Demon King was in danger. Gu Shengyin almost immediately panicked. She closed her eyes and slowly felt the location of the Demon King. After a long time, Gu Shengyin opened her eyes. She found her destination, the Starlight Forest in the south of the Carter Empire. The elves, known for their beauty and fighting skills, lived there. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and understood the Demon King's idea. He should want to get the spring of life that the elves had guarded for generations to reconstruct his body. The two of them had reached an agreement on this matter. When Gu Shengyin became a sword saint, they would go to the Starlight Forest to obtain the spring of life. She didn't expect that this man would go alone without saying a word. Gu Shengyin felt a little helpless, but she didn't delay. After reporting to her parents, she stepped on the road to the Starlight Forest. No matter what, she could not sit back and watch her man fall into danger. The Demon King's current situation was indeed not very good. After all, he was the Demon King who once reigned over the entire continent. Even though he no longer had his physical body, his realm was much higher than the current Elf King. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to sneak into the Elf tribe's forbidden area. As long as he could find the spring of life and bathe in it for 7 days, with the strength of his soul, he would be able to grow a new body. However, he underestimated the power of the fountain of life. Perhaps, it should be said that he had overestimated the spirit body's endurance. In this secret technique, a lot of supplementary materials were needed to reconstruct the body. However, the Demon King had always thought highly of himself. He believed that those who needed these external materials were not strong enough, so he disdained them. Now, he suffered because of his arrogance. When the spring of life washed over him, the Demon King felt as if his soul was being roasted in a raging fire. The pain was indescribable. However, this wasn't a big deal. The crux of the matter was that the formation he had set up earlier to deceive others had shattered because of the soul fluctuations being too great. Almost all the elves felt the movement from the forbidden area. Chapter 82. The Elven King was instantly enraged. The Spring of Life had always been the Elven tribe's most important treasure. Even the Elven tribe could not easily enter its location. Now, an outsider had actually broken in and caused such a huge commotion. The Demon King felt the elf race's actions, but he couldn't say anything. He was at a critical moment, so he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. If the elf race attacked him. When the King of Elves arrived with his people, he saw a translucent figure sitting in the spring of life that was emitting a faint green glow. It was a spirit. The Elf King glanced at the spring of life and couldn't help but feel distressed. According to this loss, it would take decades to recover. He was about to order his subordinates to attack when the spirit in the spring suddenly said, "I came here by accident. As you can see, I'm already sitting here. If I come out now, you've already lost everything and can't make up for it. Why don't you let me stay here for 7 days? I can swear that when I come out, I'll tell you about the Tree of Life." When the words, Tree of Life, came out, all the elves present became excited. The Elf King was no exception. His snow-white long eyelashes trembled as he asked suspiciously, "Outsider, you really know about the Tree of Life?" The man in the spring lazily said, "I can swear to the light god that if I lie, I'm willing to accept the punishment of the god." For all the creatures on this continent, swearing to the god was the most sincere oath. The Elf King believed him. "Then we can make an exception and let you stay in the Spring of Life for 7 days. After 7 days, I'll bring my people here to wait for you." The Elf King finished and prepared to leave. At this moment, something strange happened. The originally calm Spring of Life suddenly trembled violently. The spirit in the spring had his eyes closed and was unaware of the situation around him. It was obvious that he had lost consciousness. The elves were surprised by the change in the spring of life when a strange smell suddenly swept through the forbidden area. It was like the fragrance of a certain flower. The elves, who had always been known as nature's favorites, couldn't tell what kind of plant it was. "Look!" An elf suddenly pointed at the man in the spring and exclaimed. Countless white flowers suddenly bloomed around the spirit body in the spring water. The flower was very large with layers upon layers of petals. It was beautiful but not bewitching, gorgeous but not extraordinary. It carried a dignified and noble beauty. It turned out to be a species that the elves had never seen before. The previous fragrance was obviously coming from here. At the same time, on the left shoulder of the man with his eyes closed in the spring water, a mark slowly appeared as if it was seeping out from his skin. It was the appearance of the unknown flower. The elves were stunned by this change. They could clearly sense that the moment these strange flowers appeared, the vitality of the entire spring of life suddenly increased by countless times. At this moment, the man in the spring opened his eyes. What kind of eyes were those? At first glance, there was only endless coldness and emptiness inside. At a second glance, it turned into endless vitality and reincarnation. When he looked at her again, his eyes were filled with compassion and compassion. All the elves could only think of one word when they saw such a look in his eyes: God. Chapter 83. Gu Shengyin arrived at the Starlight Forest without stopping. The closer she got, the stronger the symbiotic contract felt. Obviously, she was very close to the Demon King. However, ever since she felt the pain in her heart, she no longer felt this uncomfortable. Thinking about it, the Demon King's crisis had been resolved. After all, he was an old monster who had lived for tens of thousands of years. How could something happen to him so easily? However, thinking about it was just thinking. Without seeing him in person, Gu Shengyin was still worried. The Starlight Forest was full of danger. Although the elves loved nature, they were not very friendly to humans, especially those who trespassed into their territory. Just the endless monsters and plants in the forest were enough to stop the average person. However, Gu Shengyin, who had the system, obviously did not belong to the category of average person. It was already night. Gu Shengyin chose a safe place to rest for the night. She closed her eyes and chatted with the system. System, do you think he will be reincarnated with me in this world? The system, unable to find the target's information, unable to answer the host's question. With Gu Shengyin as its host, the system had to say that it had gained a lot of knowledge. All kinds of things that had never happened before were now normal around Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin, I don't know why, but my desire to find him in this world is not that strong. Before she finished speaking, Gu Shengyin's face suddenly changed. She could feel that her dou qi in her body was increasing at a terrifying speed. It was completely out of her control. This was the power of the symbiotic contract. What did the Demon King do? How could it increase her strength so much? Gu Shengyin's mind gradually became absent-minded. Her spiritual energy was somewhat unable to control the speed of the dou qi in her body. If this continued, she did not know what would happen. Boom! Gu Shengyin felt something shatter. Her consciousness also fell into a deep sleep. At the same time, not far from here, in the elves' territory, the black-haired man opened his eyes. A dark light flashed across his eyes, and his figure moved, disappearing on the spot. As soon as Gu Shengyin regained her consciousness, she fell into a familiar lotus fragrance. She sniffled nostalgically and moved her head. Only then did she realize that she was in a familiar embrace. "You're awake?" A deep voice with a smile sounded. The Demon King looked at the person in his arms who was rubbing against his chest like a Siamese cat. This voice? Gu Shengyin opened her eyes and saw a smiling face. Gu Shengyin blinked, then blinked again. That's right, this familiar face. Demon King? The man laughed and leaned over to kiss her on the cheek. You're not mistaken, my dear, it's me. Gu Shengyin sniffed. The smell was right. So, the lover she had been looking for was actually the Demon King. Chapter 84. Because she had confirmed that he was her lover, Gu Shengyin did not refuse. Her acquiescence made the Demon King ecstatic. For a moment, the two of them were unable to restrain themselves. After the kiss, Gu Shengyin fell into the man's arms, gasping for breath. Her white skin was dyed red and her green eyes were soft like spring water. This appearance made the man almost unable to restrain himself. The Demon King kissed the treasure in his arms. What, you're not going to find your lover? He deliberately said. Gu Shengyin took the initiative to give her lover a kiss. You are my lover. Feeling the familiar hard thing on her thigh, Gu Shengyin secretly laughed, but her expression did not change. This man had always treated her so carefully. Even after confirming their relationship in the previous two worlds, no matter how hard he endured, he did not touch her before they got married. Because that man had said to her, You are the most precious treasure in this world, I can't have you so carelessly. The Demon King kissed the top of her head and suddenly said, Feel the changes in your body. Gu Shengyin did as she was told. I actually broke through to Sword Saint. She was in disbelief. This was Sword Saint, the peak power of an empire. The Demon King said with a smile, I have reconstructed my body and my strength has returned to its peak. With the symbiotic contract, it is not strange for you to break through to Sword Saint. If it wasn't for the fact that you are too young and can't withstand another breakthrough, it would be more than this." His words were full of regret. Gu Shengyin did not know whether to laugh or cry. "A 16-year-old sword saint expert, you can't be too greedy." The Demon King thought about it and agreed. In any case, he would always be by her side, so sword saint was enough. "That's right, where is this?" Gu Shengyin realized that she was in a strange place. "This is the residence of the elves," the Demon King replied. Gu Shengyin was amazed as she looked around. The decorations here were not as gorgeous as the Duke's mansion, but in terms of delicacy, the Duke's mansion could not compare. "Let's go, I'll take you to the elves' territory to have a look." The Demon King held Gu Shengyin's hand and walked outside. The elves were indeed a race favored by nature. The elves that Gu Shengyin saw along the way, regardless of whether they were male or female, old or young, were all rare beauties in the human world. However, Gu Shengyin always felt that it was very strange. When these elves saw the two of them, they all had expressions of awe and even worship. She was not narcissistic enough to think that these emotions were because of her. She voiced her doubts. The Demon King replied casually, "About that, I only told them about the Tree of Life. You know, if you live longer, you will know more than others." He hid what happened to him in the Spring of Life. It wasn't that he was trying to hide it, but that even he was unable to explain the situation. Gu Shengyin's mouth twitched when she heard the Demon King's answer. However, she also understood why the elves were so friendly to them. The Tree of Life was the divine tree of the elves. It was said that every elf was born from the Tree of Life, and when the elves died, their souls would be taken away by the Tree of Life, waiting for their next rebirth. The Tree of Life of the elves suddenly disappeared thousands of years ago, which caused the elves to not have any new elves for thousands of years. Although a few thousand years was not a particularly long time for the long-lived elves, it was undeniable that without new blood, the elves would eventually die out one day. Chapter 85. There was a lively event in the White Rose Duke's mansion recently. "Have you heard? Her Highness brought a man back from her training." "Of course, I also saw him." TSK, he's really good-looking. He's a good match for Our Highness. I just don't know who he is." After all, Our Highness is the next Duke of White Rose. His daughter went out for training and came back with a lover. Even though Duke Richard was mentally strong, he felt a little confused when he heard the news. The Duchess was very satisfied with the man her daughter brought back. The Devil King was handsome and knew how to please people. In less than a day, he coaxed the Duchess into smiling when she saw him. The Devil King knew people's hearts well and knew what countermeasures to take for each person. It took him less than half a day to win the Duchess' favor. And it took even less time to win the Duke's approval. The process was simple. He and Duke Richard had a fierce fight in the martial arts field of the Duke's mansion. The Devil King, who had won the approval of the Duke couple, did not slack off. He could not live in the Duke's mansion with his baby. Even if Gu Shengyin did not care, there would definitely be all kinds of rumors. He could not bear to let his baby be wronged. So, half a month later, the Emperor of the Carter Empire proudly announced to all his ministers that the Empire had one more sword saint expert and personally conferred him the title of Earl. When the opponents of the White Rose family were laughing at their heir's taste in choosing a partner, the Devil King used practical actions to tell them what it meant to be slapped in the face. The following days were the time for Her Highness Roman and the new Earl Norman to show off their love. When you went out to watch an opera, you could inadvertently look up and see Her Highness Roman sitting there, and Earl Norman was carefully picking out the ingredients she did not like for the snacks in front of her. At the palace banquet, as long as a man appeared beside Her Highness Roman, Earl Norman would immediately appear beside his fiancée and hold her waist possessively to declare his sovereignty. "Do you think Her Highness will be unhappy? Take a look. Who is that woman with a sweet smile on her face?" People who lived in the capital would often see Her Highness and Count Norman strolling together on the streets. Because Her Highness did not like to be followed by servants, Count Norman, a noble count and sacred swordsman expert, would carry the trinkets that Her Highness took a fancy to along the way without complaint. This directly led to the unmarried ladies of the royal capital looking up to Count Norman when they were choosing their future husbands, leading to the birth of a batch of older, leftover women. As for the married ladies, they would complain to their husbands about how considerate and attentive Norman was to his fiancée. They were both women, but why was there such a huge difference between them? This anecdote was called the Earl Norman effect by later historians. Eve was now a captain of the Duke's private guards. As she watched the interaction between His Highness and the Count, she would sometimes fantasize. If she was the one who had always stayed by the Count's side back then, would she be the one by his side now? Captain! Eve turned around. It was one of her guards. It was said that he was also from a small noble family. His family used to be a viscount. Eve looked at him suspiciously. The guard's face flushed red. After a while, he said, "Our family will have a bonfire party tomorrow night. Do you want to go with me?" Eve looked at him seriously and suddenly smiled. Okay. It was time for her to pursue her own happiness. Chapter 86. Veronica Roman, the 11th Duchess of the White Rose, had lived a glorious life. Her talent was incredible. At the age of 16, she successfully became a sword saint. This record had not been surpassed by anyone, even tens of thousands of years after her death and after the Carter Empire had been annihilated in the dust of history. She was invincible. She led the White Rose Army of the Carter Empire and was invincible. In her lifetime, she had doubled the territory of the Carter Empire. She was conferred the title of Honorable Duchess by His Majesty, and her scepter was engraved with the noblest titles of the two empires. She had a discerning eye. Eve Heather, who was known as the Genius Sword Saint, was discovered by her when she was down and out. She brought her to the Roman family and started Eve Heather's glorious journey. Her appearance was beautiful. It was recorded in the history books that Princess Veronica was the incarnation of God in the world and the messenger of light. Anyone who saw her would be impressed by her appearance and temperament. During her reign, her suitors could line up from the Duke's mansion to the gate of the capital. However, the most popular topic of conversation was still the unswerving love between the Duchess and her husband, Count Norman. Earl Norman's origin was mysterious. The first time he appeared in the public eye was as the lover of the Duchess, a sword saint. Ever since the two of them were together, they had never been separated. Whether it was playing, going on diplomatic missions, or war, Earl Norman would appear wherever the Duchess of White Rose was. It was said that the two of them had signed a symbiotic contract. They would live together and die together. The love between the two of them was written in countless biographies and spread widely in later years. Gu Shengyin was very happy in this life. When she left, she already had feelings. She, who was no longer young, held her husband's hand and smiled sweetly. "I'll go first. In the next life, remember to come and find me." The black-haired, black-clothed, handsome man looked at his wife, who was sleeping peacefully with her eyes closed. He gently leaned over and kissed her lips. "Fool, have you forgotten the contract between us? You don't have to go first. I'm right behind you." Gu Shengyin opened her eyes in the pure white space with a smile on her face. She didn't stop smiling and said to the system in front of her, "I don't have any problems and I don't need to rest. We can move on to the next mission." She was very sure that her lover would be waiting for her in another world, so she didn't want to stay in a place without him. This was the system's first time meeting a host who couldn't wait to complete a task. However, as long as the host's decision was beneficial to completing the mission, as a system, it had no right to interfere. The next world is the immortal cultivation world. Host, please check the world's information. Gu Shengyin's vision turned black. After the familiar dizziness disappeared, she found herself kneeling in a large hall. She lowered her head and looked at her hand. It was thin and soft. It was obviously a little girl's hand. There were hundreds of children kneeling in the hall. They were dressed similarly to Gu Shengyin, and they all looked about 7 or 8 years old. "Since you're able to enter this hall today, you're disciples of my Starnet Sword sect. However, Being able to enter this hall only proves that your foundation is suitable for cultivation. As for sword cultivation, the most important thing is the sword heart in your body. Now, let's start testing your sword heart. The level of your sword heart will determine how far you can go on the path of sword cultivation. Chapter 87. Gu Shengyin quietly knelt in the hall. Her face was calm, unlike other children. One by one, the children walked to the front and stood in a specific place. Gu Shengyin knew that there was a special formation there. When people stood in it, they would show different reactions. Lin Yixing, Wood of the Five Elements, Level 3 Sword Heart. Can enter the outer sect. A misty green halo appeared in the formation, and the elder reported the level of his sword heart. Lan Yingyue, Water of the Five Elements, Level 5 Sword Heart. Can enter the inner sect. Gu Shengyin listened quietly as the elder reported the numbers one by one. In this world where the sword was revered, the sword heart determined whether a person could become a swordsman. At the same time, it determined how far a swordsman could go on the path of the sword. The sword heart was divided into 3 levels. The low-level sword heart was Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. The medium-level sword heart was Level 4, Level 6. The high-level sword heart was Level 7, Level 8, Level 9. The higher the level of the sword heart, the higher the talent in the path of the sword, and the higher the compatibility with the life-bound sword. However, although the sword was revered in the endless sky great world, only 1 in 10,000 people could become a swordsman with a sword heart. As the largest sword sect in the endless sky great world, the Starnet sword sect standards for selecting disciples were naturally much higher than ordinary sections. At this moment, the hundreds of children in the hall had all passed the basic test, and all of them had a sword heart. At this moment, a girl not far from Gu Shengyin stood up. She attracted Gu Shengyin's attention. This girl was the target of Gu Shengyin's mission in this world. Bai Xinya was born in a middle-class family in the endless sky great world. Her mother was the concubine of that family's head, but she was rather doted on. Bai Xinya had lived a life of luxury since she was young. The biggest blow she had suffered was probably the Star Azura sword sect's recruitment of new disciples this time. Bai Xinya, Water Element, Level 1 Sword Heart, can join the outer sect. Bai Xinya's eyes were wide open, as if she had never imagined that her sword heart was only at the first level. She seemed to be at a loss of what to do. Her big eyes were quickly filled with tears, making her look very lovable. The elder beside her seemed to have rarely encountered such a situation. Seeing Bai Xinya like this, the usually strict sword cultivator actually softened his voice, which was rare for him. He coaxed her, "Don't worry too much about it. As long as you cultivate diligently, it's not like there aren't any swordsmen who become strong in the end despite their low level of sword heart." Gu Shengyin found it a little strange. She asked doubtfully, "I already know the plot." Bai Xinya's talent is obviously very ordinary, and her looks are not peerless. Why would there be so many men willing to offer everything just to make her happy? Moreover, no matter how cold and ruthless a person is, there is no way to be fierce in front of her. The system was suspiciously silent for a moment, then replied, "Host, you may not know, but in this world, there is something called the White Lotus Halo." Before Gu Shengyin had time to be popularized as to what this White Lotus Halo was, she heard her name. Gu Weixin. She stood up slowly and walked to the center of the array with a calm expression. The elder in charge of the test also looked at her curiously. The children who were brought here were generally 7 or 8 years old. When they came for the test, they were either uneasy or eager to try. It was rare to see someone as calm as Gu Shengyin. Chapter 88. Gu Shengyin did not pay attention to what the elder was thinking. Her body was called Gu Weixin, and she was a direct descendant of a superfamily in the sky below great world. The children of these families always matured earlier than others, so no one would doubt her calmness. Moreover, no one knew Gu Weixin's aptitude better than Gu Shengyin. Icy Heart Clear. Advance courageously. 10th level Ice Soul Sword Heart. As soon as the elder finished speaking, everyone in the hall, except for the children who were still in a daze, looked at Gu Shengyin in unison. In addition, there were several powerful spiritual senses from all over the star-gathering sword sect that descended on Gu Shengyin's body. The elder in charge of Gu Shengyin's test seemed very excited. He looked like he wanted to laugh, but his long years of expressionless face made his whole face somewhat distorted. He did not say where Gu Shengyin could be assigned, but let her stand alone on the other side to wait. Gu Shengyin still walked to the side with a calm expression. The elder looked at her and thought to himself that this girl probably did not understand what a 10th level sword heart represented. Otherwise, how could she be so calm? How could Gu Shengyin not know? The sword heart was divided into 10 levels, and the 10th level was the highest quality sword heart. This body's aptitude was the 1 in 10,000 10th level sword heart, and even rarer was the rarely seen Ice Soul sword heart. According to the 5 elements, the Ice Soul sword heart should belong to water, but it was mutated from the water element. A mutated sword heart could not only make a swordsman's attacks more powerful, but even rarer, it would carry some characteristics that the 5 elements did not have. For example, if the Ice Soul sword heart was cultivated to a high level, the sword intent could freeze thousands of miles. And the power of the Ice Soul sword heart did not stop there. Its greatest characteristic was that the ice heart was clear, otherwise it would be dust. In other words, Gu Weishin's path of the sword would not be entangled by mental demons. The greatest obstacle to a sword cultivator was mental demons. With Gu Shengyin in front of her, everyone else's brilliance was overshadowed. Even though there were several talented disciples with high-level sword heart, the higher-ups of the Star-Gathering Sword School still focused on Gu Shengyin. There was no other reason. Ordinary high-level sword heart swordsmen might be able to become sword emperors, sword venerables, or even sword masters through diligent cultivation. However, if one wanted to become a peak sword saint, one had to have a 10th order sword heart. Sword emperors, sword venerables, and even sword grandmasters, the Star Azura Sword School had no lack of them. However, even with the Star Azura Sword Sect's foundation, they only had 2 sword saints. One of them had already lived for a very long time and had been in seclusion for many years. Only the upper echelons of the sword faction knew that the great elder was on the verge of death, and these 2 sword saints were the guarantee of the Star Azura Sword Sect's position. Therefore, the current Star Azura Sword Sect urgently needed a new sword saint powerhouse to stabilize their position. Gu Shengyin stood among the elders and watched as the hundreds of disciples were assigned to different sects one by one. Those with excellent sword heart aptitudes were accepted as personal disciples by the main peak elders. In the end, only she was left. She stood there quietly and did not speak. In the eyes of others, she was born with the bearing of a master. In reality, Gu Shengyin was only listening to the system's so-called White Lotus halo. As expected, powerful. Gu Shengyin exclaimed. No wonder with the original body's attributes that were like cheating, she would also be defeated by Xinya. Chapter 89. The voice of the system sounded in Gu Shengyin's mind. The so-called White Lotus halo, anyone who is illuminated by this halo will lose the ability to judge, the infinite beautification of the halo owner in the mind. The original body Gu Weishin, I have to say, can be called perfect in all aspects. Family background needless to say, the Gu clan is a top family in the whole Tianlan continent. Talent needless to say, the 10th order Ice Soul Sword Heart has the potential to become a sword saint. Even her appearance is described in the original plot. She stands there, like the most cold and flawless ice and snow on the holy mountain in the north. Autumn water is the god, ice jade is the bone. And if she smiles gently, it is like 10 miles of spring breeze, melting ice and snow, blooming flowers, and her face is frightening. However, she was such a perfect woman in every aspect, yet the first man she fell in love with decisively abandoned her after seeing Xinya. What's more, when Xinya was injured by the fire poison, the man didn't know where to find out that as long as he used the blood of the heart of the person who had the Ice Soul Sword Heart, he could detoxify the fire poison. He even relied on Gu Weixin's trust to drug her and forcibly took out her heartblood. Poor Gu Weixin's realm was greatly reduced, and he encountered the invasion of the demon clan. He even lost his life. I don't kill Boren, but Boren died because of me. However, the man didn't care about his own sins at all. He only cared about love with Bai Xinya. Bai Xinya didn't even ask how her poison was detoxified. She was with a man with a clear conscience. Gu Shengyin sneers. The fire poison is incurable except for the blood of the heart of the person who has the Ice Soul Sword Heart. In the whole Tianlan continent, only Gu Weixin is the Ice Soul Sword Heart. It's impossible to say that Bai Xinya doesn't know who saved her. However, she can ignore this question and never ask. Even when she learned about Gu Weixin's death, she didn't say anything. It's really a pure and flawless white lotus. While Gu Shengyin was absent-minded, all the elders in the hall were arguing over who to accept Gu Shengyin as their disciple. Who wouldn't want to take in a 10th-tier sword heart that was hard to come by in 10,000 years? However, before they could come to a conclusion, a message from the most distant and mysterious mountain of the Star Azura sword sect stopped the discussion. The elder ancestor who had been in seclusion for many years and no longer cared about worldly affairs actually came out of seclusion in person and said that he wanted to take Gu Shengyin as his disciple. With that ancestor taking action, the others naturally did not dare to have any objections. The Star Gathering Sword Sect Star River Sect Master personally led Gu Shengyin to the ancestor's Ling Xiao Peak. Gu Shengyin was a little surprised. There was no such thing in the original plot. Gu Weixin was finally accepted as a personal disciple by Zhenren Xinghe and became the first disciple of the Star Luo Sword Sect. If he became the disciple of the ancestor who had been in seclusion for many years, wouldn't his seniority be much higher than that of the leader? Gu Shengyin secretly hesitated. Thinking of the Devil King in the last world, he couldn't help but have another guess in his heart. Could it be that the legendary ancestor would be his lover? In this way, it makes sense that it's different from the original plot. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but have a little expectation in his heart. Ling Xiao Peak was located in one of the most remote places in the Star Gathering Sword Sect. Few people came to disturb it on weekdays. The residence of the ancestor was on the top of the peak. In order to show his respect for the ancestor, Zhenren Xinghe took Gu Shengyin step by step to the top of the peak. Chapter 90. Ling Xiao Peak was 1,000 feet tall, and the distance from the foot of the mountain to the top was not short. However, just halfway up the mountain, Gu Shengyin could not hold on any longer. Although her natural aptitude was against the heavens, she was now only an 8-year-old child. Such a journey was too long for her. However, she did not have any slack or complaints. Zhenren Xinghe looked at the little girl with a calm face and followed him to the top of the mountain without saying a word. Even though her forehead was covered with sweat, Gu Weixin never cried out for exhaustion and proposed to rest. Zhenren Xinghe secretly praised her. Her aptitude was against the heavens, and her heart was tenacious. This girl was really a natural seedling for sword cultivation. At this moment, a crane cry came from the distant horizon. Gu Shengyin looked up and saw a beautiful white crane falling from the sky. At the same time, a voice like ice and jade colliding came from the red-crowned crane, "Come up." Gu Shengyin looked at the red-crowned crane with some novelty, but Zhenren Xinghe respectfully saluted the crane. "I will obey the orders of the great ancestor." After that, he held Gu Shengyin in one hand, tapped his toes, and landed lightly on the back of the white crane. The white crane gave a long cry, spread its wings, and flew towards the top of the mountain. The two of them stood at the top of the mountain, and the white crane that had just supported them flashed with white light, turned into a light paper crane, and disappeared. Gu Shengyin. The world of cultivation is really magical. At this moment, Elder Xinghe, who was standing beside Gu Shengyin, suddenly changed his expression and became respectful. After a long while, Elder Xinghe suddenly turned to Gu Shengyin and said, "The great ancestor has been in seclusion for many years and does not want to see strangers. I will not accompany you to see him this time." He told Gu Shengyin where the great ancestor was and left. Gu Shengyin. If it was really the 8-year-old Gu Weixin, at this time, he must be nervous and scared, right? She walked towards the cave abode that Sage Xing he had pointed out. Without a doubt, she had obtained the approval of the owner of the cave. Those terrifying restrictions set up in the cave did not react to Gu Shengyin at all. Gu Shengyin observed her surroundings as she walked. If Zhenren Xing he had not personally pointed the way, she would never have imagined that there was someone living in this place. There were no superfluous decorations in the cave, and the walls were bare. As she walked in, she saw a few simple futons on the ground. On the right, there was a large stone room with messy sword marks on the ground. Gu Shengyin only took one look at it, and she immediately felt a stinging pain in her eyes, as if her mind was being pricked by needles. She couldn't help but cry out in pain as cold sweat poured down like rain. Calm your mind. The cold jade-like voice that was heard from the white crane appeared once again. At the same time, a hand was placed on Gu Shengyin's head. Gu Shengyin only felt that there was a cool air coming into her body from the hand on her head. The stinging pain was smoothed out one by one with this cool air and disappeared. She opened her eyes and looked at the man who looked very tall and straight for her at the moment. She saw the long hair that was like a waterfall. It was snow-white and long to her ankles. Under the long hair, there was a strange young face. Gu Shengyin saw such a person for the first time. He had the face of 20 years old, but the eyes of 100 years old. Of course, his real age was definitely more than this number. This ice and snow man leaned over to Gu Shengyin and said, "Would you like to worship me as a teacher?" You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.